Last time we talked about the First Fleet as a whole, why it came, who was on board, and what happened when they arrived. But now, it's time to dig deeper. Behind every number, there's a person. Real lives, real struggles, some tragic, some triumphant. Today, we're going to follow a few of them, convicts, leaders, survivors. Their stories help us understand what it really meant to be part of that first journey to Australia. Let's start with Mary Wade. She was just 11 years old when she was convicted. 11, still a child. Her crime? She and another girl stole a dress from a younger child, that was it. And the punishment? Death by hanging. In 1789, child offenders were often made an example of. But Mary's case shocked people. There was public outcry. Her sentence was eventually changed to transportation for life. Now, Mary wasn't on the very first 1788 fleet. She arrived with the Second Fleet in 1790 aboard the Lady Juliana. But her story gives us a critical insight into what life was like for young convict girls in those early days. She endured an overcrowded, disease-ridden voyage and arrived in a struggling colony. Conditions were harsh, but she survived. And not only survived, she thrived. She went on to have 21 children, many of whom lived into adulthood. She became a grandmother to over 300. By the time she died in 1859, at the age of 84, she was one of the most well-known matriarchs in colonial Australia. And today, tens of thousands of Australians are her descendants. That's legacy. Now let's talk about John Hudson, the youngest known convict on the First Fleet. He was just 9 years old when he was convicted. John was a chimney sweep, a horrible job, especially for a child. In 1783, he was caught stealing a snuff box and some clothes. That earned him a 7-year sentence. He was sent to the hulks, those floating prisons we talked about last time. And then, in 1787, he was put aboard the Friendship, one of the First Fleet ships. Now think about this. He was the size of a primary school kid, crammed in with adult men, shackled, living in filth, enduring an 8-month sea voyage. When he arrived in Sydney Cove, there wasn't much mercy waiting. No schools, no youth services. He was likely put straight to work, clearing land, carrying supplies, maybe even cutting timber in the bush. After that, he disappears from the records. Some say he may have died young. Others think he just blended into the convict population. Either way, he became a ghost in the system, a child lost to time. His story reminds us just how brutal the justice system was. 9 years old. Stolen snuff box, 7 years in chains. Alright, buckle up. Because this one's an adventure story. William Bryant was a Cornish fisherman. In 1784, he was caught impersonating a Royal Navy sailor to collect extra wages. For that, he was sentenced to 7 years transportation. He came over on the First Fleet and later married fellow convict Mary Broad, who became known as Mary Bryant. They had 2 children in the colony, but life was harsh. Food shortages, disease, military control. The Bryants wanted out. So what did they do? They stole a government boat. In 1791, along with 7 other escapees, they launched an open boat and sailed over 5,000 kilometres from Sydney to Timor. With basic tools, no map, and a toddler on board. They survived storms, starvation, and near death at sea. They navigated by sun and stars and managed to reach Dutch territory, where they were captured and handed over to British authorities. William died in captivity, but Mary and her surviving child were returned to England. Public opinion had shifted. People were amazed by her courage and resilience. Mary was eventually pardoned and lived out the rest of her life as a free woman. From convict to folk hero, Mary Bryant's story shows us the power of determination and just how far people would go for freedom. Now, let's meet James Ruse, the man who fed the colony. James had been a poor farm labourer back in Cornwall. In 1782, he stole 2 shillings and was sentenced to 7 years transportation. He arrived with the First Fleet aboard the Scarborough. But James wasn't just another convict. He had something rare, farming knowledge. Governor Phillip took a chance on him. In 1789, he gave James a small plot of land called Experiment Farm to see if crops could grow in the Aussie soil. It wasn't easy. The tools were basic, the soil was unfamiliar, the weather was wild. But James worked hard and succeeded. He produced enough food to support himself, and soon others were given land too. He became the first emancipated convict to be granted land in Australia. He later married a fellow convict named Elizabeth Parry. They had children and ran a working farm that helped feed the struggling colony. Ruse didn't just build a life, he helped build the foundation of colonial agriculture. And today, parts of Western Sydney still carry his name. Now, let's look at the man who led the whole thing, Phillip. Phillip was a naval officer, a skilled sailor, and a thinker. He wasn't the most charismatic, but he was methodical and disciplined. That probably saved the colony. He arrived with orders: establish a penal settlement, survive and maintain order. What's interesting is, he wasn't cruel. He believed in rehabilitation, not just punishment. He tried to treat convicts fairly, insisted on rations being shared equally, and even pushed back against harsh military discipline from the Marines. He also had a vision for peaceful relations with Indigenous people. One of the most notable episodes was his relationship with Banalong, a member of the Eora Nation. Phillip had him captured, not great, but later formed a genuine diplomatic connection with him. Phillip was once speared by a warrior named Willamering, and his response? He ordered no retaliation. That's unheard of for the time. Still, despite his efforts, colonisation had brought disease, conflict and trauma to Indigenous communities, something Phillip could never control or reverse. He returned to England in 1792, exhausted and ill, but he had done the near impossible, kept the First Fleet alive and laid the groundwork for the colony's future. These aren't just names on a list. They were children, families, escapees, farmers, leaders. The First Fleet wasn't just a moment in history, it was a gathering of real human stories, many of which still echo today. And for every Mary Wade, every James Ruse, every John Hudson, there were thousands more. Some made it, some didn't. All of them are part of the story of Australia. In the next episode, we'll look at what happened after the First Fleet, the slow, messy birth of the colony, the next waves of ships, and how the settlement began to grow. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. See you next time.